Thank you, Russell, and hello, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here. I should like to thank the members of the Gertsch family. They made this possible. I should like to thank Ivan and James Koch from the gallery, of course, and the whole staff. It's been great working with the great people here during the last week, setting up this show. The show is like little retrospective in nuce. So we have core paintings from the main periods of Franz Gertsch's work. He's born in 1930 and only actually breaks through, also for himself, when he's almost 40 years old. So there's a long period of ripening, of deciding what to do, and then he starts working after photography, taking his cue from old masters, from Caravaggio, Vermeer, from Dürer, who also all used optical devices, of course, in order to compose their paintings. He uses photography, so he gets trained professionally by a friend as a photographer, and the first step, which is an integral part of the work, is always a photograph. So he's one of the late 20th century artists who's a crucial figure in this field of collaboration, blending, hybrid between painting and photography. He works with slides, so he does slides, he projects the slides on a screen, and then he tries to figure out to learn how to paint from this. It seems trivial. You think, okay, you project the slide and then you stand in front of it and paint it. Try it. It's not as easy. First of all, the colors are not what you used to, because you're under the colored light. So the color you have on your brush, it will look different. So you're blinded, basically. So Franz develops a device, a foot switch, where we can turn off and on the slide projection in order to have some kind of control. And it's like flipping back between what he puts on the canvas and what the photograph then projects. Always taking the liberty to divert also from the photographic first image to get more into a painterly development, sometimes always using the photograph in order to control if he had gone a stride too far. So the 70s throughout, he works in this technique. We have the two major Patti Smith paintings in this show, which are like the culmination. They are at the end of this 1970s, where he produces 24 of large-scale portraits, mainly of young people who are not his generation. They're younger. He's fascinated by the young people of the 1970s, the way their attitudes, the way they dress, the way they behave. Same thing with Patti Smith. They were not friends. He saw the record in a window of a record store, walking past, and he was fascinated. You remember the Mapplethorpe photograph, Patti Smith horses. He walks in, he gets the record, and then he hears that Patti Smith is about to give a reading, a poetry reading in a gallery in Cologne. He travels there. He annoys her by swirling around the stage all the time, disturbing her. She even hisses at him. One of the paintings shows her really telling him to fuck off, basically. That's what happened. She was not very happy. And he goes back, and from the hundreds of photographs that he took, he chooses 5. And this does the series of 5 Patties. 3 are in major European museums. 2 we have here. From this point, he starts painting. He thinks he has reached a certain point where there is no beyond, and he invents, we have to say, a new technique, which is the woodcut. He chooses woodcut, which is quite paradox. As you know, woodcut is not the technique you would choose to give subtle hues of light and dark. Woodcut usually is very harsh. It's dark and bright. It's lines. You remember German Expressionism, Renaissance woodcuts. And he invents an entirely new original technique. This goes from production to the plates, which he does in collaboration with a local carpenter, choosing the wood, lime wood, covering the wood with a layer of paint, then carving out point by point. So these are composed of individual light points that in a painstakingly long process for the big triptych, this took him 2 years of work. He carves out point by point, which then at the end ends up with the plate. He travels to Japan to develop a paper with a Japanese paper maker that would be able to absorb then what he had carved. He develops the colors. We have actually the gentleman from Germany, I don't know if they're still here, who worked with Franz Gertsch over decades developing the pigments and the colors that Franz then used, because they were not ready-made things you could buy in a store. So he produces the color and he invents and develops the printing technique together with a team. So the plates are being put flat on a table, then the color is really being rubbed in by roughly 6 people at the same time, because you want to have the same humidity at the same time all over the plate. If you do it alone, it will be dry when you arrive at the other end and you can print no longer. At a certain point, the paper is being put on. Then the same goes for printing, which is a hand technique with glass bowls that he had made. They virtually rubbed in the color for hours and hours until the final moment, then lifting off the paper, seeing if it had worked. Many did not work. There were some that had patches where it had not printed, where there was too much color. So this was all over years. He took this technique to perfection. At a certain point, returning then to painting, and this is the 3rd chapter in our exhibition here, which is the big triptych here at Guadeloupe, which represents his later period painting, taking also learning from the lessons that he had with developing the woodcut. He now does all the color himself. These are still acrylic colors that you could buy in an artist supply store, no longer here. And you can see also the way of painting gets more free. It's more kind of like a post-pointillist approach, using these patches of color, which then from a certain distance close and get together and create the image. As you will see when the gallery is empty, which I hope will not be the case, it's important to walk back and forth, to move within the space and to change the distance. He did not want to do something like a photograph. A large-scale photograph will always look the same. If you get closer, if you're nearer, you will lose some focus. But these paintings, they are more like our eye works when we really look into the world. Our eyes always move. You see, he also added little patches of out-of-focus zones, then focused zones, and also with the woodcuts, you see like they really develop their plastic values as you move about in the space and look at them from various distances, in different light, from different angles. So the subject matter is very traditional, so you can call Gertsch a traditionalist. It's landscape, it's portraits, it's a nude. There's nothing fancy or especially original about, no, it was all about painting, about really rendering what he saw in a technique which would be unique, which would correspond to what he wanted to communicate about the way he saw the world. The subjects matter, they're all from his surroundings. So he moves to a country house in a countryside, an old farmhouse in Switzerland, in the pre-Alps, in the mountains, quite isolated. And everything you see, it's just when you stepped out of the house. So Schwarzwasser, that's a creek which runs nearby to his house, which he took photographs on. This is virtually outside his house, at a little piece of landscape. Here, this is a souvenir from a trip they took with his wife, Maria. The photo was taken much earlier, so decades later, as an homage to his lifelong companion. He does this triptych with his wife in the middle. Of course, it's Eve in the garden in paradise. It's the female, the reclining nude. Again, we have Tintoretto, Giorgione, the whole tradition of the reclining nude. The portrait in the back, as you can see, Natasha is also a country girl who was one of his son's girlfriend at the time. So it's about painting. It's about what painting can produce, what he could do, what he could achieve to show us the world the way he saw it, which he developed. So finally, at last, I'm sorry, Nicolas, I'm very happy that Nicolas made himself available for this event. I know that he knows Franz Gertsch. So he is a New Yorker now, but he grew up in Switzerland, and he is, of course, familiar with the work. He's also an artist who is very much about the basics of the craft, of the technique, the materials that are being used. He's also, as we know, a big connoisseur of painterly tradition, of European painting tradition, of Swiss painting tradition, because after all, this comes out of an European tradition, but also of a Swiss tradition. So, Nicolas, do you remember when you first saw works by Franz Gertsch and what it was?
Hello, everybody. I'm very happy to be here, and yeah, thanks so much for asking me. It's a great. We did 2 projects together, and it's always great to see you and do a little talk with you guys. I don't think I remember because it's in every Swiss museums. There is a presence of Franz Gertsch here and there. But I remember seeing a retrospective probably when I was in my early 20s. So when I was already like in art school. And I was already having, I think, maybe a better understanding of what was, 20th century, especially like post-war art, and there was also like I remember there was a documentary about the process of the printing, as Tobia described the technique and the really extreme dedication that Franz Gertsch had for the crafts and the making of those objects is extremely important part of the work itself. And I think when probably one of the as a young artist, when I saw that documentary and when I saw the work, like one of the things that really marked me was this dedication that an artist can have, that's spending so much time to perfect a craft, a gesture, really kind of spending literally hours and hours and months and years into, have a very small production and a very like heavily dedicated, again, like practice. I think I was also very interested in this early on because I'm kind of the opposite. I'm not that patient as an artist, and I want to move quickly very often. And any artist that is basically stopping and making time much slower, I'm always extremely envious. It's the kind of the Morendi kind of fascination of like how amazing that an artist can just stay back home, have a few pots and just like do that all day. Like I think a lot of artists are very like drawn to this idea because it's this like a fantasy, and I think is a very strong example of that practice of being like, okay, the time that I have, we don't have the all time in the world, but I'm just gonna like completely like not be stressed out and just like spend as long as it takes to make those incredible objects. And it's very fascinating to me.
When you started working, maybe it was also a bit different because when Gertsch starts working, it's quite strange to do figurative work. First, it was abstract painting in the 50s, then it was conceptual art. So he was always also kind of an outsider. Perhaps you found yourself in a different situation already a bit at the start of your career.
Yes, but you know what? It's interesting that you make that like little analogy with abstraction and figuration, because I grew up in Lausanne and in the French part of Switzerland, and at this school called École. And at that point, there was a very, very strong kind of fashion or like trend to this Neo Geo kind of like post Olivier Mosset or even Max Biel tradition, a very Swiss tradition of geometric painting, odd edge painting, and all the teachers literally were doing this. Like also like Arne, there was a teacher there, but like people like Philippe de Croza, or like, I mean, maybe not people know that, but and it's true, like doing figuration then was also a little bit of a like, oh, like figuration is really not what was actually like really the taste of the day at that point when I was a student. And I think going to this work, I think like when you decide to do figurative work, and it's one of the questions I had to ask myself when I was in art school, you said, okay, I'm definitely going to paint something that is recognizable. That's what we call, I guess, figurative. Like very quickly, you have to ask yourself, so what I'm going to paint, and why I'm going to paint it. And I think probably like Franz Gertsch, I turned it very quickly to the most traditional and most obvious subjects, which was basically I started to do landscapes, portraits, and I named them landscape portrait because I wanted to be very clear, oh, this is what they are. There's nothing, else there than that it's a landscapes. And I think what I wanted to also explore, maybe unconsciously, but I've been like working on, is like, what is the deep meaning of painting those things? And I think actually in this room, you, by very traditional subjects and very kind of it's just outside of his house, I think you can see how like those very traditional, done over centuries subjects are actually like maybe the best one to actually resonate with very big questions related to arts, thinking. And I think for me, what is driving me in the show is this idea, this, in a way, like beautiful idea and meditation on time that he's having, obviously, because he's taking so much time doing it, but he's working with a photo, which obviously takes a second to do. But also, like, he's clearly like drawn to youth, and how like youth is this very short moments. Obviously this woman here, like this girlfriend, but also this performance of Patti Smith is such a like a moment that he was feeling. Oh, this is definitely a little very ephemeral moment. Like, also it's a performance, musical performance, but it's like very clearly like a time-based, and it's actually kind of interesting, this watch also for me, like in India, and it's to kind of stop the time. And I think he was very fascinated by that, like this idea of like how to represent time in the subjects and how time passes, how it's ephemeral, but also by basically spending so much time almost as a performance kind of artist, that I find it like very beautiful and very touching, and you can really feel it in the work.
Right. Another element, characteristic of Gertsch's work, which you have seen immediately when you came into the gallery, stepped into the gallery, it's the size, of course. We have also, it's good to remember that at this time when he starts doing these supersized works, there is no Gursky or Ruf or Struth yet, so photographs could not be printed, focused photographs in that size. This comes a little bit later. And also in painting, there is not really much that he can rely on. So you also work in very various sizes. So I think thinking about size is an important element of your work. Seeing something like this, seeing the woodcuts, which do not relate to what we are usually being presented with. It's beyond human scale, something we see on billboards, perhaps, but rarely in galleries. Perhaps you can tell us much better than anybody what it means, what the difficulties, what the challenges are, also going to these sizes, going beyond all the traditional formats that paintings have.
Yeah, and I think as that's definitely something that struck me the first time I saw this retrospective in Switzerland in my 20s. It was definitely, the scale was something that was very like impressive and unusual, and the impact on the viewer is very direct. It's true that it's maybe slightly less unusual nowadays because we see a lot of, and especially in New York, there's a lot of big paintings often, but it's true in terms of, and actually back then, and even in my time in the museums in Switzerland, there was not that many large scale kind of, especially figurative paintings or figurative photos. So it was kind of very interesting. And it's true that I do love working with scales in my practice, and especially doing works on wall, which will be, like taking an entire wall. And I think like, how it works as an artist is like the normal size of a painting related to your body is probably like, the impressionist or the kind of like, modern type painting is, like that. It's kind of like, you can have in an easel, and your body doesn't need to like, actively move back and forth. Obviously big paintings have been existing for a long time, but like if you work like on nature or whatever, you don't want to like move on a big scale. And I think as soon as you start to do large scale, what happens is that the physicality and the performative aspect of painting comes really into place, because you have to move, you have to be on a ladder, you have to like really physically be very engaged. And I imagine for the woodcut even maybe more, because obviously like this, and I do also woodcut small, very traditional size, but like in that scale, like you constantly have to like obviously like kind of moving and like lifting those heavy pieces. So I think there's and that aspect of the studio practice, this physicality of the artist in the studio, then is very felt when you see the work. You really feel that presence that is, I think, very very powerful. And especially like there's this definitely this contrast between this very strong physicality of the work and imagining the performance of this and the fragility of the work itself, because it looks obviously so detailed and so precise, but in the same time it's very big, and it requires like literally like muscles, and so there's a beautiful contrast between those two kind of forces that is very, very present in the work. Then it's true, that's something that I also love to explore, like this physicality of the size, but the fragility of the medium and the subjects. Again, the subjects represented are very fragile and very ephemeral, I feel.
One of your main materials you use is pastel, which is also quite uncommon, as Gertsch liked to be challenged by uncommon thing. Do you think there's some also similarity or something that you can relate to, that to do big works also with a technique which is not usually used?
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously you use woodcut with, absolutely what is not made for, and it's made in facing extreme challenges, technical challenge to achieve those pieces that we see here. And it's true, like I do murals in pastel, which is also really not the medium for it, and it requires like a lot of technical pre-work in order to do those big murals. It's obviously not the best kind of a medium to do that. And as you mentioned, pastel is also a medium that is extremely underused in our current kind of art world. There's very, very, very little presence of especially large scale pastels in shows or fairs or museums in the last decades. And it's interesting if I think about him and like why he chose to do the woodcuts, and as why an artist suddenly choose a medium that's puts you basically a little like isolated. And I think it's maybe like in my experience it's probably because it makes you feel like, I guess you feel more secure in a way. I think like for me, like the going away from oil painting and the very canonic kind of idea of the oil paint on canvas, I think I was literally like way too kind of anxious and scared of the implication of that specific object to be made. I think I was maybe not consciously, but I went to a medium that was very underused. So I was probably just feeling, well, at least I don't see that many of those. I was feeling safer. And I'm wondering if Franz Gertsch also, he faced during, a good 15 years of his early career, probably a lot of questioning of like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know exactly what I'm supposed to do. And every artist kind of facing that, but definitely before I was doing pastel, I will definitely see myself questioning a lot about that. I don't know exactly how I'm supposed to choose all those different things, the medium, the technique, the sizes. And it's really, in my case, it was really the pastel that completely opened up everything in my work and in my career. That it's from like in a matter of 6 months, a year, that everything changed because the medium itself. And I feel like with him, I mean, of course, like when he, but it definitely like choose a way of painting that was extremely unusual, and that made him like completely isolated. But some people like it, some people don't. But I'm definitely on his side of, I like to be isolated. I feel more confident, maybe because I'm a little bit of a coward, I guess.
Maybe one last question. One thing which we have seen, which you have mentioned, Gertsch is definitely one of the main post-war artists departing and integrating photography. So he goes from photography, through photography, beyond photography. That's basically what he wanted to do. I was wondering if you ever use photography. Does it play any role in your practice?
No, actually, I was always actively trying to be exactly the opposite, because I did grow up in an environment that figurative painting was heavily based on photos, exactly the opposite of his time, where it was very new to do it. But like in the 2000s, there's a lot of like it's obviously the starts of this heavily image-based kind of culture with the phone and the advance of digital camera. So there's much more images, and obviously internet, and it blow the amount of images and like finding images. And so you see more and more. And in art school, there was a lot of people finding, like based their painting on photos. And I think I was like, again, I don't want to do that. It's because I felt there was too many people probably doing it. And I was like, I'm going to like really start from scratch, more as like almost like if I paint a tree, I don't want to have any images. And slowly, it's my main inspiration was always other paintings and historical paintings. And as for example, I paint a lot of trees, and there's obviously an endless sources of tree painting in art history. And so that's kind of the but I did, and it's slightly different now, because I did few series. I did those forests, fire forests kind of, and those they're not like a reproduction like that at all, but there's definitely, if you see them, I think you can see that I've been looking at a photo. They have more like a photographic, a little bit kind of aspect to it. But it is something that is very interesting. I think nowadays there's slightly less kind of, I think it's definitely this post generation with Luc Torments. I mean, it's the same generation, I guess, that Gerhard Richter, like that really explore the idea of the image in their work with photos. I think now it's like, obviously that's kind of phases obviously is not there anymore. And I think there's actually figurative paintings nowadays, which is a very big kind of presence. There's actually not that many photo-based kind of paintings. So it's again like much more like drawing based or like illustrative based kind of work than the photo based. But he's definitely part of this group of few people, with like Richter is the most famous one, but I will put him like next to him in terms of how important his work is during this post-war area of choosing images and photo as like as a medium and transfer into painting as a conceptual kind of act. It's kind of really revolutionary at the time.
Thank you. We're almost 40 minutes into our talk. Please, if you have questions, that's the moment for Nicolas, for myself, about Franz Gertsch, about anything. Yes?
Are there any reports of the
Yes? Oh yes, very many. In the 1970s, lots group portraits, single portraits, male figures in the 1970s. There's a book also on the counter that you can see there. Mainly also a group of friends, younger artists who were younger than him, and he made friends with them, got acquainted with them, and he was fascinated by their appearance, by the way they behaved, the way they dressed, the way they moved, and so they became actually the main subject matter in the mid-1970s of his work. I think there's only one monumental male portrait, only head portrait, and that's a self-portrait of himself. The rest are all female.
There's an interesting reminiscence that comes to mind looking at this selection of works that evokes the work of Mark Tansey to me. And I was wondering if you were aware, I mean, I should assume that you are, of his larger
Yes.
for time. Gertsch worked in a few conceptual areas of like genre interest. If there were through lines that he seemed to be pulling at, or if with each series he moved into an area to discover some particular.
Yeah, one difference might be that it's not about history with Gertsch. It's not about any historical events or any particular historical context and situation, which is all at the core of Tansey's work. Perhaps rather the aesthetic approach or technical approaches might be, but otherwise it's almost the contrary. Gertsch tries to be timeless, basically.
The monochromatic woodcuts look to me like a woven fabric of reflected and diffuse light. And so I'm wondering, well, this space is just one space, so the lighting is a kind of a compromise, but were this made to be viewed in a more diffuse and muted illumination, or how would Franz Gertsch with it? Or what do you like?
Yes, so we have daylight here during the day, which then blends, and also according to the weather, it's very different. We have been here now for a week, so you get very different shades and very different qualities of light. It starts mixing then with the artificial light. For myself, it would be hard to tell really, which is everything is interesting, and perhaps that's one of the qualities, that it remains good and interesting under very, very different light situations. I would guess that Franz Gertsch himself, he might have preferred a controlled situation and not a situation like here, where there's also random light situations that might appear when there's a thunderstorm and the sun breaks through, etc. So he would certainly, as it is very much about stillness and standing still, a resting time, he would not maybe a particularly brightness or quality of light, but to have it unchanged. So here it's a bit different. Yes.
Did he use this projection method or any other way?
Right. He kept using them, but then always modifying through the decades as he went along.
And then what sign of the actual
Of the
handle of the wood? Is it he?
Yes, so they're being put together by different pieces of wood, and then they're flattened and straightened out, so it gets a continuous piece. You see, this is the image, and then the plate would be a bit larger, but not immense. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed it, the show, and enjoy service. Thank you.